Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. And I am Joe, and I'm your host every Tuesday evening right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. And we talk about real estate. We've been doing this show, I think, over 12 years. And this show is for you, the consumer. So I try to give a lot of relevant information that would be helpful to you and interesting. So I guess at the top of the show, let's talk about interest rates. Okay, this week, the 30-year fixed rate from my reliable mortgagenewsdaily.com is 6.15 for a 30-year fixed rate. FHA 5.81, VA 5.83. Big difference, folks, between a VA loan, a Veterans Administration loan, and an FHA loan is that the VA loan is no money down. It's 100% financing. It's for active military and veterans. And there's no PMI. Whereas FHA, you put 3.5% down and you have to pay PMI. PMI is private mortgage insurance. So when you have a small or no down payment, typically you have to pay an additional dollars every month as an insurance policy in case you default on a loan at some point. The bank will have an opportunity to recover any shortfall. So, I was just talking to John when his show wrapped up. And of course, the housing market is frozen the past few days. Not much is going on. Pretty much everybody was closed yesterday. Today, a lot of us worked from home. I know I did. And, not a lot of home showings going on. Perhaps there are some, if you had scheduled a home inspection or an appraisal or a closing, maybe things were going on. But, not everybody is in the mood to go out and look at houses when the temperature is in the single digits or very low double digits before the wind chill. And then you have to navigate the snow and parking and all of that. So, I'd imagine for the rest of this week, activity is going to be slow. I mean, I have plenty of work that I can do, reaching out to people, responding to emails, things like that, providing home valuations, etc. There are always things to do, but they aren't always, you don't have to go out. When it's weather like this, cold temperatures like this, sometimes it's just better to try and work from your office, whether it's the work office or the home office. So one of the things I want to talk about tonight, what I want to spend a lot of time on this week, is something that's, it's a sensitive issue. And we've touched upon this in shows past, but, when you're in a situation where a parent needs care, housing decisions need to be made, and families do not usually see them coming. So tonight we're going to talk about one of these hardest decisions that families have to make and the housing mistakes that can cost them time, money, and peace of mind. And that's a big part of it too, is that whole peace of mind thing, because, when it's a house you grew up in, there are lots of memories, of course, there are lots of belongings and things like that. So what's really important is calmness and just being a little more circumspect. It's many times very helpful, I have found, to work when someone works with a real estate professional and his or her team to help navigate these challenges. When I say the team, it's not just real estate related, because sometimes, mom or dad they're aging, maybe they're getting a little forgetful, they're having some slip and fall situations. We are having, it's an aging population. And something that needs to be considered are nursing care and assisted living costs. And it's important to do whatever you can not to be caught unprepared. So this show, it's not going to be about selling homes. This show is going to be about order, timing, and avoiding regret, because that's something that can eat away at you over time. There comes a time when family members, kids, grandkids come to the realization that mom, dad, grandma, grandpa can no longer live safely at home. And that's a tough realization to arrive at. And then what do families think the first question should be, as opposed to what the first question is, as opposed to what it should be? All right, so it's important to just listen, because most families don't make bad decisions. They make rushed decisions. And just think about it. You've mom or dad, they're, getting on in years, and, you and your spouse, and you've got your kids, and you're shuttling the kids around to different practices or dance and this and that. And it's always something that gets pushed to the side, the back burner, until mom or dad slips and falls or something happens. And it becomes a situation where you're kind of forced to deal with the reality of the situation. And, this type of a transition, it's different than when you're upsizing or downsizing or relocating for a job, because this involves a loss of independence. Many times it's a matter, it's the old guilt thing, okay? And then you've got family dynamics. And if you have more than one child, it can be kind of challenging, because who's going to shoulder the burden, the majority of the burden? Is it the child that lives closest or not? Or maybe no one lives close. Then what do you do? Additionally, a home it's more than an asset at this point, because it's really the family house. So there's that sense of identity that everyone has. All the cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, friends. Oh, let's go over to the Luca house. Okay. Then you have the memories in the house. Okay, when holidays, birthdays, things like that. And then there's a realization that you don't have control. Okay, as a homeowner and even as a family member, you may not have control of the situation. So now emotions can start to distort or impact decision making. Common emotional traps are: we need to sell immediately so we can get mom or dad or grandma or grandpa into a nursing home or into assisted living. Or let's just get it over with so we can move on. And then we'll deal with this stuff later on. I saw a meme online, and it was an older guy with like a cane staying in front of a garage. The garage door was open, and the garage was like many garages, full of stuff. And he was there with a younger man to the side of him, and he said, "Son, someday this is all going to be yours." Ha. That is something that can be really challenging and quite a burden for a child or a grandchild to take on, because again, they have their own life, their own obligations, their own schedule that they have to adhere to. And there are certain housing mistakes that are more common than others. Sometimes folks sell the house before understanding what the care plan is going to be and how it's going to be paid for. Making housing decisions without legal or financial context. Underestimating the time required. The time, too, empty out the house, declutter it, make the necessary repairs. Find a facility for mom or dad to go into. Ignoring the emotional weight of personal belongings, or letting one family member drive rushed decisions. I have some very dear friends, 5 kids in the family, and mom went in an assisted living and then a nursing home, and it was like one family member was driving the decisions, was kind of taking the bull by the horns, but another family member was the most emotionally engaged on a daily basis with the mother. So the dynamic there was interesting. And then neither one of them were the child that lived in the house with the mother when she was there. So sometimes you have a lot of different things like that going on. What's important is that the housing decision, all housing decisions, should support the care of the homeowner, not create an urgency. So of course, that means, we talk about this every week in one form or another, preparation. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So there is an order of operations, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this. Step 1, clarify the care need. Is it assisted living? Is it skilled nursing? Is it temporary? Is it long-term? And then what is the reality of the monthly cost? Hearing numbers like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month, that's not a crazy number. Okay. And the thing that is toughest to realize, and I know I realized this with my grandmother towards the end of her life. She, declined, and she was in great shape. She was, I think, 95, and the doctor said her heart was like somewhere 10 years younger. Unfortunately, she started to experience dementia. And that, there comes a point as we age where you don't get better. You plateau. You don't get worse. So if you go a week, 2 weeks, a month, and you don't get any worse, that's a win. That's a win. Because a lot of times little things start to happen. You get pneumonia, or you slip, you fall, then you get pneumonia. And it just kind of, degenerates from there. So it's important to understand how the home fits into the grand scheme of things. Is it going to be a funding source for the assisted living or skilled nursing? Does it have to be? Okay, is that a requirement? Because there are no other monies to deal with that. Is timing flexible? And what decisions can you put off? What decisions do not need to be made yet? You want to try and have as many of those as possible. I'm not saying procrastinate and don't deal with things. But if you start this process early enough, you can make the decision that needs to be made first. And then if the last decision to be made is, choosing a facility, great. You don't have to make that now. Mom and dad can still live in the house or whatever. Maybe, you want to line something up. It depends. Every situation is different, is what I'm trying to say. Next is you need to coordinate the right professionals. And of course, this depends on where you are in the process. Early enough, you want to work with an elder law estate planning attorney. You want to have care coordinators or social workers engaged. and then have a housing advisor. And I'm saying housing advisor because it's not just a realtor or a real estate agent. It's not just selling the home. There are a lot of other things that must be dealt with, and they must be dealt with in a delicate manner. So it's important to have this perspective. Order matters. When family skips steps, stress multiplies. And I've seen it can get exponential. One of the most overlooked issues is belongings. I personally, I have been called, a pack rat. I hold on to things that have sentimental value. Because a lot of us, it defines who we are. The books that we have, the furniture that we own, things, cars that you have, hobbies, things like that defines who you are as a human being. So if I'm getting to the point where, or someone's getting to the point where they need to make this final transition into assisted living or a nursing facility, there's going to be resistance to divesting oneself of a lot of belongings, because those things, those belongings, have contributed to the makeup, the essence of what the person is. And when you rush these types of things, you run the risk of the danger of regret, family conflict. You have one person that attaches sentimental value to things, and someone else who's like, nope, can't take it with you, get rid of it. And then the emotional fallout. So it's important that these things need to be dealt with in a respectful and sensitive manner. Sensitive to the homeowner, but then also to family members, okay? If you have one or two children who are dealing with everything, they may live in an apartment, so they can't take anything with them, mom and dad's stuff that's been in the house. I know my last house I lived in for 20 plus years, I couldn't believe all the stuff I had, and it's like I was the curator for the Luca family museum. I was like, why am I keeping all this stuff? And I knew why I was keeping it, but you have to make the decision. I had a friend of mine, this was a million years ago, and he bought a house and he lived there for 2 years, and he had to move again for work. He was like, there's still stuff that's in boxes from when I moved 2 years ago. He said, if I haven't opened it in 2 years, I'm putting it on the curb. So that's one way to deal with belongings. It may not be the way that families can agree on. So options that families don't realize that they may have are: one, time. If we start this process early enough, time can be your friend and not your enemy. Phasing. We can do things in phases, okay? Tackling parts of the house, tackling sizes of items, things that are used, aren't used, depending on the situation, we can compartmentalize the belongings, organize them. And then maybe we have a partial solution. We can't solve the problem 100%, but maybe right now we can solve it 50%. And again, part of what I try to bring to the table is solutions or options for people, so it's less stressful. You're in a situation like, oh my gosh, I have all of my mother, father, grandparents' stuff in the attic and the garage and the basement. How am I going to get it out of there? I can barely move the stuff myself on the first floor. we have people that can help organize. And what I am very passionate about is, I think the word is repurposing. I do not like to get rid of things and just have them contribute to the, filling up the landfill. If something has utility left, I think it's incumbent upon us to see if somebody wants to buy this stuff, as opposed to just throwing it away. So as a housing advisor, some things that I do to help are, advise families what they should expect from a housing professional. Okay, getting educated, part of what we're talking about tonight. Establishing a timeline, a clear, easy to understand timeline that is acceptable to everyone involved without rushing anyone and without belaboring or delaying necessary decisions or steps. Coordinating everything together. Again, that timeline will help us establish how we can coordinate. And then patience. I understand the difficulty, the challenges of these decisions. So I have empathy with folks who have to deal with this transition. What families should not have to deal with is pressure. Oh, you want to list a house? This is the best time of year to list a house. Oh, the market may turn, interest rates may do this or that. That is not even secondary. That's tertiary or, beyond. Pressure is not good. Fear-based tactics. No, you don't want to, wait. You need to hurry up, because creating artificial urgency, anyone trying to push you to make decisions and take actions that you're not ready to take. Now, if you're in a situation where it's the end of the line, well, yes, now you have to make decisions. So you have to start doing things. But if you have time, take your time. Like I said, have time be your friend and not your enemy. It's the difference between a transactional agent and a transition advisor. I'm a senior transition professional. Okay. And I've done it many times. I've done it when folks are still alive and well living in the home. I've done it where they're not so much so, when they've already passed on or they've already moved into nursing homes. And I've had it start out in the first and then end up in the third option there. So I've dealt with it all. So, it's a challenge that needs to be dealt with. But if you take the right steps and plan ahead, it makes it a lot easier and does not create more stress. Because again, the family has their own set of lives and obligations that they have to deal with. So the house can be sold in 60 days. Regret can last decades. That's why I try not to rush these things. As order matters. When families skip steps, stress multiplies. many times belongings are harder to deal with than the house. First of all, there's a lot more of them. You know, as I said before, you rush the dealing with belongings, you have regret, family conflict, emotional fallout. But planning everything out can help. You don't want to put yourself into a situation where you are going to regret, because regret can last for years. You know, I want to just say, I shared with you a real world scenario where, you know, I listed the house, the woman was fine, and then it's about to go under agreement. She goes into a hospital for tests, quote unquote. Never came out of the hospital, passed away, never signed the purchase contract. So then the family was in a tough situation. You know, I've had other situations where folks plan ahead. We start talking a year in advance, and there's a lot of stuff. So we make arrangements for someone to start dealing with all of the belongings in the home as the homeowner was declining in, I want to, not just declining in health, but just in declining in independence. Okay, she needed to be in an assisted living facility. You know, the house, it was actually here in the North End. It was, you know, several stories and had, I don't know, 25, 30 years of stuff in there and 15 or 20 years of neglect, deferred maintenance. So we had to get the house emptied out. Then we had to get the house marketed. There was, as I said, some deferred maintenance issues that had to be addressed and quantified so that we knew how much to discount from what, you know, fair market value would be for a house like that in the North End that was in tip-top shape. Subtract out from that the problems, the known problems. Okay. And that was a good situation. I've had other situations, you know, the house under just closed. It was, the house was empty. The homeowner had moved into a nursing home a few years ago, and a sibling moved into the house, and then the sibling passed on. So it was kind of a unique situation. But again, the house was full of stuff, and the homeowner who was in the nursing home couldn't deal with it. And the person who a lot of that stuff belonged to was deceased. So that was a service that value that I added to the transaction for my client. And, you know, when we do these things, and if we arrange an estate sale or sell things, those monies go to the homeowner. They don't go to me. Okay, so typically the way these things work, the folks I work with, they will go in, they'll sell everything, and then they take a commission. So, you know, whatever, depending on the situation, I don't want to quote numbers now, but, you know, it depends on what you negotiate, how much they're going to have to do, the condition of the equipment, of the belongings, etc. But every situation is different. And that's why we try to be sensitive to everyone's individual specific situation. What's essential is that as a senior transition professional, I remain calm, because if I'm upset and crazy, my client, who has even more reason to be stressed out, is going to be even more stressed out. Having a sense of order, you know, order of operations, and then respect for the homeowner or the deceased, respect for the process, respect for the belongings, respect for the family members, respect for their relationship amongst themselves. So if you're in a situation where your family is facing this now or maybe facing it, you see it coming down the road, having a roadmap matters. Having a game plan matters. As my Uncle Joe always said, plan your work and then work your plan. Plan your work and then work your plan. So in this case, plan the transitional process and then make it work for you. What I try to offer everyone is just an education, because a lot of times, most times, people haven't dealt with this before. So we'll have a conversation. We'll talk about, wants, needs, realities. My reality is, listen, I don't need to sell the house. I can afford to pay for my nursing home. I have absolutely no money and I need to sell the house, and somewhere in between. And you might say, well, Joe, but I thought if they go into, a nursing home, the government takes the proceeds from the house. If steps are not taken, yes, that is the case. However, nevertheless, the person has to find a facility to transition to, and then you still have all of their belongings. And the house still has to be sold. And obviously, you want to try and have as much value from the house so that goes to paying for your, your assisted living or skilled nursing needs. The earlier we start putting a plan together, the better we are, the less pressure there is. And as I said earlier, time will be our friend, not our enemy. However, when that's not the case, death was a surprise, no one had done any planning, I do not apply any more pressure than is necessary. Now, if it's a situation where there are mortgage payments that are being missed and other things going on, obligations that need to be met, that's going to be a very different scenario when you have a house that's paid off and we just have to worry about keeping the utilities on so the pipes don't freeze. So two different sets of circumstances, two different realities for the pressure of time. When a parent needs care, the house becomes a question. How you answer it as a family member matters. Now, if anyone has questions about this, like I said, maybe you're thinking about it, it's a year off, 6 months off, 6 years off, reach out, 401-409-5030. I'll answer any questions you have. You can even text me if you don't want to talk, 401-409-5030. And I'll answer any questions you have. I'll meet with you, no obligation, no signing anything. I'll answer any questions you have. And we'll address any misconceptions that you may have, or that the public in general has. We'll talk about timing myths, okay, because everybody seems to have heard something that I haven't heard before when it comes to timing, and many times they are not based in reality. And if we start early, we'll talk about, okay, this can wait, that can't wait. This medium urgency, that absolutely no urgency. Knowing what can wait and what cannot wait is a huge stress avoider. Okay. It's stressful. Buying and selling a home is stressful in a perfect situation. Every time you add one of these other layers or sets of circumstances that needs to be considered, it adds to the stress. The more people that are involved adds to the stress. The more stuff involved adds to the stress. As a senior transition professional, what I try to do is help establish what decisions can wait, what decisions should not wait, and what decisions absolutely cannot wait. Many times families rush the wrong things and delay the right ones because you don't know. I mean, kind of some cheat notes here. These are some time sensitive items that should be addressed early in the process. One, safety and care needs. Okay, is mom or dad falling down? They're not stable. Okay, that's a big one. So then should they not even be living alone now? Risks of falls, going up and down the stairs, wandering, medication errors. If you've got to take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different medications at different times during the day, some with food, some on an empty stomach, others on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, others every day, it gets confusing. Before you may, you have diminished mind. Stairs. I remember my great aunt, she lived a couple of weeks shy of 101. And she lived in a typical mid-century small ranch, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Laundry was in the basement. And now, mind you, she's 100. Auntie, why don't we actually said this before she was 100, but Auntie, why don't we move your laundry upstairs so that way you don't have to go up and down the stairs to do your laundry? And she goes, oh no, Joe, you don't have to worry about that because my physical therapist, he told me how to go up and down the stairs. Open parentheses, she went to a physical therapist 25 years before. So she had been doing this for 25 years. And maybe going up and down those stairs probably 3 or 4 times a week because she did small loads is what kept her mobile. She was still going to the hairdresser every week up until 3 days before she passed. Well, 3 days before she went in the hospital, a week before she passed. So you need to be aware, can grandma or grandpa, can he or she cook? Did they remember to turn the stove off? Did they remember not to leave the dish towel next to the stove? When you go to visit, pay attention to how they care for themselves, how they're feeding themselves. Are they losing weight? If they're not eating properly, they're not getting the right nutrition, they may lose weight, may not, lose muscle mass and then can't stand upright or gain their balance if they slip or whatever. If they're getting forgetful, then you have to worry about wandering, where they go out and forget how to come back home. You need to have family members or caregivers who supervise or pay attention or support them and what they're doing. So care decisions come first. Housing comes a distant second. Next, you have to clarify the level of care that's needed. Do they need assisted living? Do they need skilled nursing? Is it temporary rehab? Is it long-term? What are the expected progression of needs? If you have, 75-year-old parent who's in really good shape and they, fall down and break something and go in rehab, all right, they're pretty sharp and everything else is good. That's different than if you have an 85-year-old parent or even another 75 who was having problems before the event. You cannot make smart housing decisions without this clarity. And then you need to be aware of costs. What is the base monthly cost of care in an assisted living facility, in a skilled nursing care facility? What's included? What's extra? When are payments due? How do they have to be made? Very frequently, families underestimate costs and overestimate how quickly decisions are going to have to be made. It's also very important when determining what type of care and looking at facilities. Not only do you want to look at pricing, you want to look at things like cleanliness. You want to look at their reviews and their history. And talk to other people who are there. You know, it's very frustrating when grandma or grandpa's dentures get lost in the laundry and you don't have a backup pair of dentures. It's very frustrating when they do the laundry and you bought grandma or grandpa all new pajamas or clothes or whatever, and the laundry was so hot everything shrank. These are things you need to pay attention to. And then legal authority, decision-making power. Who can or will be the one to legally act on the parent's behalf? Should you establish power of attorney where it's a third party, an unrelated party? What about healthcare proxy? Do you have that? What is healthcare proxy? These are questions that you should have the answer to, and you should understand what they are and what your options are and what the implications of those options would be. Without this, families can get stuck, even when everyone is in agreement on what to do. Then it's a matter of coordinating all the right professionals. Okay, getting an elder care attorney or real estate planning attorney, getting a care coordinator or a social worker lined up, and then getting a housing advisor lined up early for education, not pressure. Misalignments here can cause more frustration and stress and chaos later on. Now, here are some things that can wait. We talked about the things that shouldn't wait. These are the things that can wait. Number one, selling the home. Very rarely does this need to happen immediately. Even when the home will fund care. Timing often matters more than speed. The house almost never needs to be sold before care begins. That's why it's essential to start the plan early and to bring on the right professionals in the right order. And then you need to choose, air quotes, the perfect housing outcome. Whether to sell, to rent, or hold. Whether you're going to prepare the home to sell as is or make some repairs. And then market timing decisions. Okay, market timing, a lot of times, if you do other things right, you don't have to worry about market timing. But just remember, good decisions come from clarity, not from panic. And then next, clearing out personal belongings, furniture, photos, memorabilia, collections. Furniture, those are the biggest items, okay? Many times that can be the easiest to get rid of. Photos, because hopefully family members would want the photos. One of the houses that I just recently sold, it was terrible. Like I said, the owner was in the nursing home, and the brother passed away, and there were so many photographs, photo albums, wedding albums, pictures on the wall from when they were kids. I packed everything together, and hopefully the social worker brought it to her in the nursing home, because that's the other thing too, is sometimes depending on the nursing home, you may only have a closet, and it may not be a big closet. So you really have to pare down what mom or dad is going to take with them. And that's why if there is family memorabilia, trophies that mom or dad won, awards, family photos, the family can take those things. Collections, if there's a valuable collection of china, crystal, comic book, whatever it is, stamps, coins, those are things that can be liquidated, can be sold to create money. Now, when those items are sold, that is something that, to my knowledge, you don't need to tell Uncle Sam about. But that would be a conversation to have with a good attorney. This is one of the most emotionally charged steps. And it's the one that will create the most regret if it's rushed. Because after the fact, you'll wonder about whatever that item was. Oh, I wish we didn't, do that, or I wish we did this. No one's going to say, oh, I wish we held out to get an extra $5,000 for the house. Never happens. So dealing with the belongings is very sensitive, and it's an essential part of what needs to happen. Next, final pricing decisions. Market value can be assessed without listing the property for sale. Net proceeds can be estimated without any commitment to a real estate professional. And options can be explored quietly. Information first, decisions later. Where we are in the economy and the business cycle right now, if you call me up and you say, hey, Joe, we want to figure out what's going on with the house. We're not ready to do anything yet. Mom's just getting a little older. We want to plan ahead. Great. Where we are right now, whatever the price we come up with for that house now, if it's 6 months from now or a year from now, the value, dollars to donuts, is going to be higher in the future. Family consensus on every detail is important. Not everybody needs to agree immediately. And I always tell people, take your time, think it over. Sometimes decisions evolve over time. Somebody says one thing and digs their heels in today, but maybe a month from now, they reconsider. Maybe a day from now, a week from now. And progress does not require perfection. Things can move along even if everybody isn't 100% in agreement. Something that you need to act decisively on, as we said before, is safety, care, authority, and cost clarity. You need to have a very good understanding about mom or dad's safety. Can they live on their own? Can they take care of themselves? If not, who's going to care for them? Who's going to check in on them? Is there something you just call them on the phone? Somebody need to stop by once a day? Does somebody need to stay there hours at a time? Does somebody need to spend the night? Authority. Who's going to make the decisions if something happens? And then understanding what the potential financial consequences of those decisions. Cost clarity. You need to move deliberately on housing, belongings, timing, and execution. Because when families rush housing and delay care, stress multiplies. I guarantee you that. When they prioritize care and slow housing down, options start to pop up. Give God, the Holy Spirit, the universe, an opportunity to bring options to the forefront. If you rush decisions, that's not going to happen. So, simple takeaway. If you are facing this situation, don't panic. Don't rush the house. Get the order right. Protect dignity and relationships amongst family members. If you've forgotten what we talked about, this show will be rebroadcast Saturday at 1. Or you can just call me, 401-409-5030. 401-409-5030. You can also text me at that number. It's Joe Luca, Luca, Realtor. Thank you to Compass Title and Escrow. Anthony Betancourt and his team do a fantastic job taking care of our clients. And of course, Vern Rainville, 484-300-8495. That's Vern Rainville, public insurance adjuster. That means he works for you, not the insurance company. So thank you very much for tuning in this week. And we will be back next week. And we may have a special guest for you next week.